You know, people always tell you that your home is your castle, your sanctuary, the one place on earth where the world can't get to you. But I learned the hard way that for some people, people with a little bit of power and a whole lot of entitlement, your front door isn't a boundary. It's just a challenge. I inherited the house from my Uncle Arthur about 2 years ago. Arthur was the black sheep of the family, a man who wore flannel in July and didn't believe in the internet. And he built this place himself back in the 70s. It's this angular, green metal-sided structure with a double-gabled roof that looks like a spaceship crashed into a forest. It sits on a sprawling lot that, and this is the most important part of the story, technically sits just outside the jurisdiction of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association. When I moved in with my wife, Sarah, we were looking for an escape. I'm an architect, so I spend my days designing those soulless, copy-paste luxury boxes that look like they came out of a 3D printer. So living in Arthur's weird, jagged, personality-filled house felt like freedom. It was supposed to be our fortress of solitude. But freedom, as it turns out, really irritates people who live in beige cages. The trouble started about 3 months in. The first letter arrived in a soft blue envelope, looking like a wedding invitation, but it was from the desk of Brenda Miller, the president of the Oakwood Estates HOA. The font was cheerful, but the message was pure venom masked as neighborly concern. Brenda invited me to allow a voluntary exterior inspection of my property to ensure aesthetic continuity and shared community standards. And then, the kicker, failure to comply may force the board to escalate matters to relevant municipal offices. I remember standing in my kitchen, reading that letter and laughing. I mean, actually laughing out loud. The Oakwood Estates HOA had absolutely zero jurisdiction over my land. Uncle Arthur had fought a legendary legal battle over this back in the 90s. He had spent his savings to ensure that this plot of land remained an island of independence. I had the court orders, the surveyor maps, the deed, all of it. So I responded. I kept it professional. I sent a certified letter back stating, in no uncertain terms, this property is private. It is not, and has never been, subject to the Oakwood Estates HOA. Entry is denied. Any unauthorized access will be treated as trespassing. I even attached a copy of the boundary survey, just to be helpful. That should have been the end of it, right? 2 days later, I came home to find a laminated notice zip-tied to my door handle. It was bright orange, impossible to miss. Scheduled inspection notification. Your property will be assessed on April 12th for compliance. Sarah looked at it and rolled her eyes. She's baiting you, Ben, she said while we were making dinner. She wants a reaction. She wants you to yell at her so she can call the cops and play the victim. She was right. Brenda was playing a game of chicken, but I wasn't going to swerve. I decided to get proactive. I installed 3 new high-definition security cameras, 2 tucked under the eaves where you couldn't see them unless you were looking, and 1 hidden inside a wooden flower box right by the front steps. I hooked the whole system up to a battery backup and a cloud server that pushed alerts to my phone. If a squirrel sneezed on my porch, I'd know about it. I also went across the street to talk to Mrs. Higgins. She's this 60-something retired librarian who owns 2 rescue corgis and hates neighborhood gossip more than she hates late fees. We bonded early on because she thought my house looked like a breath of fresh air. Mrs. Higgins, I told her, Sarah and I are going to be hiking in Utah for about 12 days. If you see Brenda or anyone from that board sniffing around, record it. Call the sheriff. She didn't hesitate. Honey, if that woman steps 1 foot on your driveway, I'll have it on video before she can adjust her scarf. So we left. We flew out to Utah, drove into the middle of nowhere, and hiked into the Red Rock Canyons. For the first 4 days, it was paradise. No cell service, no emails, just the silence of the desert. It was exactly what we needed. But on the 4th night, we hiked up to a ridge where we caught a whisper of a signal. My phone buzzed. It was a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. I listened to it in the tent while the wind howled outside. It was a man's voice, low and nervous. This is Gary. I'm on the HOA board. You don't know me, but look, Brenda is planning something. She's obsessed with your lot. Just keep your eyes open when you get back. That cold feeling started in my stomach. Sarah asked me what it was, and I lied. I said it was a wrong number. I didn't want to ruin the trip. But 2 days later, we were in Moab, grabbing coffee at a gas station, and we finally hit strong Wi-Fi. My phone exploded. emails, texts, weather alerts, and then the security app notifications. Motion detected. Front entry. 2:14 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Motion detected. Living room. 2:17 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Camera 3. Interior, active. I froze. Camera 3 was the one inside the hallway. It only triggered if the front door was opened. I tapped the notification, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. The video buffered for a second, and then there it was. The footage showed my front porch. A man in a blue jumpsuit, a locksmith, was drilling into my deadbolt. He looked uncomfortable, glancing over his shoulder every few seconds. Standing right behind him, looking like she was the Queen of England inspecting the colonies, was Brenda Miller. She was holding a clipboard and waving a piece of paper in the locksmith's face. It looked official, probably a forged document or that old, worthless map from the 80s. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Brenda stepped into my house. I watched, 5,000 miles away, helpless, as she walked into my foyer. Behind her were two other people wearing HOA badges like they were federal agents. They started taking photos. They opened the coat closet. They walked into the living room. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, leaning over my shoulder. Is she touching your desk?" The camera angle shifted as they moved deeper into the house. I watched Brenda walk into my home office. That's where I keep everything. My client files, my tax returns, my personal hard drives. She walked right up to my desk, picked up a stack of mail, and started photographing the envelopes. Then, and this is the moment that made me see red, she opened my laptop. My laptop was closed, asleep. She flipped it open. She tried to guess the password, jamming keys with her finger. When it didn't unlock, she slammed it shut so hard I could hear the crack through the tiny phone speaker. Then, they walked to the kitchen. One of her minions pulled a bright yellow laminated sign out of a bag and taped it to my stainless steel refrigerator. Non-compliant property. Seized for evaluation. Outside, on the exterior camera feed, I saw Mrs. Higgins running across the street, phone held high. I could hear her yelling through the audio feed. "This is private property. You have no right." Brenda didn't even flinch. She just waved a hand at Mrs. Higgins like she was shooing a fly and shouted back, "We are securing an abandoned property under community safety bylaws. Mind your business." Then the police arrived. I watched as two officers stepped out of a cruiser. Brenda met them at the sidewalk, smiling, calm as a cucumber. She flashed that folder of documents, the fake ones. I couldn't hear exactly what she said, but I saw the officers nod. They looked at the house, looked at Mrs. Higgins screaming, and then they got back in their car. They thought it was a civil dispute. They bought her lie that the house was abandoned. I stood in that dusty gas station in Utah, gripping the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. I felt violated. It wasn't just a break-in. It was an invasion of my life, my privacy, my sanctuary. "We're going home," I told Sarah. Now. We didn't sleep on the flight back. I spent the entire time re-watching the footage, cataloging every single thing she touched. By the time we landed in North Carolina, it was midnight. When we pulled into the driveway, the house looked wrong. The motion lights were stuck on full brightness. The flower box by the door, the one hiding the camera, was smashed to pieces, dirt spilled everywhere. She had found it and destroyed it. I unlocked the door. Well, the new key the locksmith had clearly given her wasn't there, but the door was unlocked. She had left my house unsecured. We walked in. The place had been tossed. Drawers were pulled out. My office looked like a hurricane hit it. I checked my desk. My passport was gone. My small fireproof safe, the one where I keep the deed and some emergency cash, gone. And my laptop? The screen was shattered. I didn't touch anything else. I walked back out, sat on the porch steps, and called the sheriff's department. Not the patrol line. I demanded a detective. When the officer arrived, I didn't just show him the damage. I showed him the footage. I showed him the clear, time-stamped video of Brenda Miller instructing a locksmith to break into a home that was legally not under her jurisdiction. The deputy watched the video of her opening my laptop. He looked at the smashed flower box. He looked at the empty spot where my safe used to be. "This isn't a civil dispute anymore, son," he said, his voice dropping. "This is burglary. This is felony breaking and entering." He took a report, photographed everything, and told me a detective would be in touch within 24 hours. I had the locks changed that night by an emergency locksmith who charged me triple, but I didn't care. The next morning, I was running on caffeine and rage when my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Meet me at the Starbucks on 4th. Come alone. I have what you need to bury her. It was Gary, the guy who left the voicemail. I drove over there. Gary was sitting in the corner, looking like a man who hadn't slept in a week. He slid a thick manila envelope across the table. I'm the treasurer, Gary said quietly. Or I was. I resigned this morning. Why are you helping me? I asked. Because she's insane, Gary whispered. She forged the meeting minutes, Ben. The board never voted to enter your house. We never even discussed it. She created a fake resolution, signed all our names to it, and used that to trick the locksmith and the patrol cops. She's been doing this for years, bullying people, issuing fines. But this, breaking into a house, stealing a safe? That's too far. He tapped the envelope. That's the proof. Original emails, the metadata from the forged documents showing she created them the night before you left for Utah. She knew you were leaving. She was watching you. I took the envelope. Thank you, Gary. Don't thank me, he said, standing up. Just make sure she never holds a gavel again. I went home, scanned everything, and sent it to my lawyer, Andrea. She's a pit bull in a pencil skirt. When she saw the evidence, she didn't just smile. She looked hungry. We're not just suing the HOA, Andrea said. We're suing Brenda personally. We're going for everything. The next week was a blur of legal filings. We hit them with a massive civil suit: trespassing, invasion of privacy, conversion of property, intentional infliction of emotional distress. We named the HOA as an entity and Brenda Miller as an individual. Brenda, of course, didn't take it lying down. She launched a smear campaign. Suddenly, flyers started appearing in mailboxes all over the neighborhood, even in mailboxes outside the HOA. They had blurry, pixelated photos of the inside of my house, photos she took during the break-in, claiming I was running a hoarding operation and that the house was a biological hazard. She posted on the neighborhood next door page, claiming I had abandoned the property and she was a hero for securing it. It was infuriating, but Andrea told me to stay quiet. Let her talk, she said. Every lie she tells is another nail in the coffin. The HOA held an emergency meeting via Zoom a few days later. Gary had slipped me the login. I watched as Brenda sat at the head of the table, looking defiant. She tried to spin the narrative, talking about preemptive protection and historical jurisdiction. But then, one of the other board members, a woman named Melissa, interrupted her. Brenda, Melissa said, her voice shaking. We never voted on this. You told the police we did. That's perjury. Brenda slammed her hand on the table. I did what was necessary. Do you want this neighborhood to turn into a slum? Do you want people like him bringing down our property values with their weird metal houses and refusal to conform? She was screaming now. I am the only one holding this community together. The feed cut out abruptly, but it was too late. She had admitted it wasn't about rules. It was about her personal vendetta. We went to court 3 weeks later. The courtroom was packed. It seemed like half the neighborhood had shown up to watch the show. Brenda walked in wearing a pastel pink suit, flanked by 2 expensive lawyers, looking like she was the victim of a terrible misunderstanding. But Andrea was surgical. She started by establishing the boundary lines. She brought in the county surveyor who confirmed, under oath, that my property was effectively its own sovereign nation as far as the HOA was concerned. Then, she played the video. Seeing it on a big screen in a quiet courtroom was different. It was visceral. You could hear the drill biting into my lock. You could hear Brenda's heels clicking on my hardwood floors. You could see her rifling through my tax returns. The judge, a stern man named Judge Patterson, leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. Then Andrea called the locksmith to the stand. He was a young guy, looked terrified. Why did you open the door? Andrea asked. She told me it was an emergency, he said. She showed me a paper with a county seal. She said the homeowner was her cousin and he had dementia and might have left the stove on. I thought I was helping. A gasp went through the courtroom. She had lied about me having dementia. Then came Gary. He testified about the forged minutes. He showed the metadata. He proved that Brenda had manufactured the entire legal basis for the entry on her home computer at 2 a.m. the night before the break-in. Brenda's lawyers tried to argue that she had qualified immunity as a board member acting in good faith. Andrea destroyed that in 2 sentences. Good faith does not include forgery, Your Honor, and it certainly does not include stealing a fireproof safe. which, by the way, has still not been recovered. Brenda never took the stand. She sat there, stone-faced, as her empire crumbled. The judge didn't take long to rule. The actions of the defendant, Judge Patterson said, looking directly at Brenda, are not only an overreach of authority, they are a criminal violation of the sanctity of the home. This was a calculated invasion fueled by personal animus. He ordered the HOA to pay $185,000 in damages. But the real blow was against Brenda personally. He found her liable for the fraud and the theft. He referred the case to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. And, the judge added, Ms. Miller is hereby permanently enjoined from serving on any HOA board, in any capacity, within this state, forever. Brenda stood up, looking like she was going to faint. Two members of the board actually got up and walked out of the courtroom before the gavel even hit. They knew the ship was sinking. Walking out of that courthouse felt like waking up from a nightmare. Sarah hugged me, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't look scared. The aftermath was swift. Brenda resigned the next day. Well, resigned is polite. She was chased out. The community turned on her. When the details of the dementia lie came out, even her staunchest supporters abandoned her. She put her house on the market a month later. It sold for way under market value because nobody wanted to deal with the stigma. Last I heard, she moved to a condo complex 2 towns over. Rumor has it she tried to run for the landscape committee and was politely told to get lost. As for the HOA, they held a special election. Mrs. Higgins, my neighbor with the corgis, ran for president. Her platform was simple: leave people alone. She won in a landslide. My house is back to normal now. Well, almost. I replaced the front door with a reinforced steel core model. I upgraded the security system to something that rivals Fort Knox. And I added a new feature to the front gate. It's a custom-built, voice-activated warning system. I call it the HOA repellent. If anyone steps onto my driveway without an invitation, a recorded voice booms out. Warning: you are on private property. This lot is not under HOA jurisdiction. Your presence is being recorded and will be used as evidence. Have a nice day. Just for fun, I had Mrs. Higgins record it. Sometimes, late at night, I sit on my porch and look out at the neighborhood. It's quiet. The streetlights hum. And I realize that Uncle Arthur was right all along. Freedom isn't just about owning land. It's about the willingness to defend it. Brenda thought she could bully me because she had a clipboard and a title. She thought the rules didn't apply to her. But she forgot the most basic rule of all. You never, ever break into a man's castle. It makes you wonder, though, how many other Brendas are out there, running their little neighborhood fiefdoms, thinking they are above the law. How many people are paying fines they don't owe or letting strangers inspect their homes because they're too afraid to fight back? So, I have to ask you guys, where is your line? What would you do if you checked your phone on vacation and saw a stranger walking through your living room? Would you settle? Or would you burn their little kingdom to the ground? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're currently fighting an HOA nightmare of your own, don't blink. You might just win. Thanks for listening. Stay safe and lock your doors.